Hello everyone, today we will be talking about the anterior forearm and the cubital fossa. My name is Leo and I will be covering the cubital fossa and the nerves it contains. The cubital fossa is the triangular area that separates the upper arm from the forearm. As you can see in this image, below the superior border of the cubital fossa is where the forearm begins. The boundaries of the cubital fossa include the superior border, here in blue. This is made up of the medial and lateral epicondyles of the humerus. The lateral border is formed by brachioradialis, here in yellow. The medial border is formed by pronator teres, which you can see in this image has been reflected, and the floor is formed by brachialis and supinator. Supinator over here and brachialis over here. Lastly, the roof is made up of skin and deep fascia. In this labeled image, we can better see the muscles that make up the boundaries of the cubital fossa. On the medial side of the cubital fossa, we can see the median nerve traveling distally to innervate all of the muscles of the anterior forearm except for flexor carpi ulnaris and half of flexor digitorum profundus. The ulnar nerve travels on the posterior side and is not visible on the anterior side. Here we can see a small part of the ulnar nerve. The ulnar nerve will innervate flexor carpi ulnaris and half of flexor digitorum profundus. Lastly, the radial nerve will travel distally on the lateral side of the cubital fossa and will split into two branches, the deep branch and the superficial branch. The superficial branch will carry sensation from the posterior side of the hand, and the deep branch will pierce through supinator and travel to the posterior part of the forearm. Another important landmark is the bifurcation of the brachial artery into the ulnar and radial artery. Traveling distally from the specific area of the cubital fossa, we can see a branch of the median nerve called the anterior interosseous nerve. This nerve will innervate half of flexor digitorum profundus, flexor pollicis longus, and pronator quadratus. This image is helpful for visualizing where the ulnar nerve is traveling posterior to the cubital fossa and posterior to the medial epicondyle of the humerus. Traveling further distally, we can see the ulnar and median nerve innervate the anterior aspect of the hand, and the radial nerve goes behind the radius to innervate a posterior portion of the hand. Next, Hilary will briefly discuss important osteological landmarks before we get into the muscle groups.
There are several important osteological landmarks on the anterior forearm and hand. Firstly, there is the medial epicondyle on the distal aspect of the humerus. This is known as the common flexor origin because all of the superficial and intermediate muscles originate there. On the hand, we have the carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges. There are 3 phalanges on each of the fingers, but only 2 on the thumb. The interphalangeal joints exist between the phalanges, and the metacarpophalangeal joints are found between metacarpals and proximal phalanges.
I'm Carling, and I'm going to start by talking about the superficial muscles of the anterior forearm. So there are 4 of these muscles: pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, and flexor carpi ulnaris. All of them share a common origin at the medial epicondyle of the humerus, also known as the common flexor origin. Pronator teres travels diagonally to insert on the middle 1/3 of the radius. Flexor carpi radialis travels distally and inserts on the base of the second metacarpal. Palmaris longus also travels distally to insert on the palmar aponeurosis. And flexor carpi ulnaris again travels distally to insert on the base of the 5th metacarpal. The median nerve is responsible for innervating pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, and palmaris longus, and the ulnar nerve is responsible for innervating flexor carpi ulnaris. All muscles of the anterior forearm are able to cause flexion at joints proximal to insertion. So this means that all 4 muscles can cause flexion at the elbow, as well as flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, and flexor carpi ulnaris can cause flexion at the wrist. And then the 2 corner muscles, flexor carpi radialis and flexor carpi ulnaris, can cause abduction at the wrist and adduction at the wrist, respectively. Next, looking at the intermediate anterior forearm, there is one muscle, which is flexor digitorum superficialis. It again originates on the medial epicondyle of the humerus, and it spans to have a long, broad diagonal attachment. It travels distally to insert on the middle phalange of digits 2 to 5. The median nerve is responsible for its innervation, and flexor digitorum superficialis is able to cause flexion at the elbow, wrist, metacarpophalangeal, and interphalangeal joints.
This is Hilary again, and I will now be talking about the deep muscles of the anterior forearm. Firstly, we have flexor digitorum profundus, flexor pollicis longus, and pronator quadratus. Flexor digitorum profundus and flexor pollicis longus originate on the ulna, interosseous membrane, and radius, forming a diagonal line of attachment. Pronator quadratus originates on the distal ulna. Flexor digitorum profundus inserts on the distal phalanges of the fingers. Flexor pollicis longus inserts on the distal phalange of the thumb, and pronator quadratus inserts on the distal radius. The lateral half of flexor digitorum profundus is innervated by the median nerve, and the medial half is innervated by the ulnar nerve. Flexor pollicis longus is innervated by just the median nerve. The action of these two muscles is to perform flexion at the metacarpophalangeal and interphalangeal joints. Pronator quadratus is innervated by the median nerve, and its action is to perform pronation.